Hi, my name is Karen Persis. I'm the chair of the BMA's Medical Students Committee. I'm deeply concerned about the rise in tuition fees because, as it is, students from lower socio-economic groups are really poorly represented in medicine, and only 1 in 7 medical students comes from such a background. And under these proposals, we can see debt rising to at least £70,000 on graduation for medical students, and that's a really conservative estimate. So we could be basically putting off some of the best potential doctors of the future just because they can't afford the fees or can't afford the debt that they will accrue through studying medicine.
A medical degree costs, roughly speaking, about £250,000. Do you think that medical students should perhaps contribute a little bit more to that when you consider perhaps a social science degree only costs maybe £15,000?
Well, I think the primary concern is whatever we do, we shouldn't be disadvantaged more than students who study something else. And the most important thing is to make sure that particular groups of students aren't put off studying medicine at all because they feel it's for those who can afford it and not for those who have got the ability.
Is medicine perhaps not one of the more assured degrees that students will get the return upon graduation? Higher salaries, higher income once they graduate. Is it not perhaps one of those degrees where students can safely say that going to university in spite of higher fees will still be worthwhile?
Well, I think it's important to remember that's from the perspective of someone who's already a student, and I think when you think about when you're 17 or 18 years old, it's hard to imagine the bit at the end, and actually what you're looking at is the significant amount of debt you're going to get in the meantime. And research has shown, and not just from the BMA but from other sources, that debt aversion is a massive factor that deters young people from attending university because they're worried about the amount of debt that they will get.
Okay. Other medical students are certainly pro the changes. For example, Imperial, which has a large medical school, is one of the only students' unions in the country to have actually voted in support of the Brown Review. What is the kind of official stance of the BMA, which is representative of these medical students?
Well, obviously we have to take into account that some students, as you've said, support the idea of the rise in tuition fees, but I think those are grounded in the fundamental belief that we want to maintain high standards in medical schools, and it remains that the majority of students that is our main concern, is the impact that these tuition fees could have on widening participation, and that is, I think most medical students will agree that you should be able to go to medical school based on your ability and not your ability to pay.
And finally, when tuition fees were introduced, there was a rise in the number of students that went to university. When tuition fees were tripled to £3,000, there was a rise in the number of people going to university. They're going to be tripled again to £9,000. If they're tripled again to £9,000, what is to say that there won't be a further increase in the number of people going to university?
Well, the difficulty is actually that we don't know, because they haven't actually waited long enough since the last rise in tuition fees to see what will happen. I started university when the fees had just gone up to £3,000 a year, and I haven't graduated yet, so it's impossible to say actually what the effect is going to be on if the fees are tripled again. But I think it is important to recognise that obviously whatever they're doing, whether there's more students or not, we're not providing a representative medical student body that is representative of the society that they will in the future serve, in that most of us will go on to work in the NHS, and yet only 1 in 7 of medical students comes from a lower economic background, and that is an unacceptable statistic as far as the BMA is concerned.